In this video, I'll be taking you through the Air Jordan 1, a very iconic shoe from Nike and Jordan. I'm going to be using Sketchbook Pro, and I'll show you some additional tricks on how to add material textures and use those as multiplied layers to really give the shoe a realistic look, and then also how to create a custom brush. And in this shoe, it's going to be used mainly for the Arian stitching that's in the midsole. So we'll be showing you that technique as well. Here's a shot of the shoe we're going to sketch and render. And I'm just going to move this off to the side. And I'm going to be using a program called Sketchbook Pro. And I've already gone ahead and created a lines layer of the design. So I'm just using a custom brush here, a pencil tool, to kind of get my basic shapes all in line. I took some colors from that image that I just showed you to get my color selectors here, and I usually use like a paintbrush, and I kind of put those in here so I can use this as a color reference. So with your line drawing all done, I'm going to go ahead and start rendering. So I'm going to create a new layer in Sketchbook Pro. I'm going to do that layer underneath the lines layer so that we can preserve all of our lines. And doing layers is great because if you actually do make a mistake or anything, you can go ahead and delete it, and it doesn't affect anything else on your drawing. So basically we have a white shoe with some red and then a little bit of black. So it depends on your style, but I'm just going to go ahead and start kind of blocking in the red areas. And depending on your style, you can be as loose as you want or as tight as you want. But what I tend to do is I'll go in and kind of erase a lot of stuff afterwards just to get my lines close, so kind of hit all my red areas, fill those in. And unless you know the shoe off by heart or you're going to do your own kind of colorway, it's good to have like a reference image, have the actual shoe or a reference image that you can get online. Got this heel foxing that's going to be red as well. You can see I'm kind of coloring right over the laces, over a lot of stuff. I'll show you in a second. I'll kind of go back and erase some things. Just want to get in all my red areas though before I start going there. And I'm rotating the canvas because I'm right-handed, and the curve of my wrist when I'm creating a stroke like this curves from left to right in this arc position. So it's good if I rotate the canvas into the ideal angle. I'm using a drawing tablet, a 13-inch HD screen. So these are pretty cool because you're drawing directly on a screen, and you're kind of seeing where your stroke is going to happen, as opposed to the Wacom other tablets that are kind of on the side, almost like a mouse pad. It's not as intuitive. I've seen a lot of people that have some pretty mad skills create some really crazy renderings and drawings using those things. So kudos to you guys for having that kind of patience and talent, but kind of opted to get the the display that actually, I can see everything right on the screen. So I'm kind of going in, getting close up into my image, changing my brush size. So right now I'm using the eraser tool, and kind of going in, and as I go I kind of change the brush scale. I hit a lot of undos when I'm doing things as well. Sometimes you want to get that nice curve, and it takes you a couple tries to get it. Another trick is, get a smaller brush size. You can get in there really close, and then increase the scale, and you can get rid of everything else around it. So obviously the smaller brush gives you a little bit more fidelity as far as getting in there nice and tight radiuses, and then the larger brush just really can just wipe out a lot of color really quick. Again, I do same deal for erasing as for drawing, kind of get that position in the ideal angle. So just kind of scanning where I've kind of missed some things. Just going to go back up here and correct this. Another trick is with the next color of black in certain areas, because I was really close with the red, I can go ahead and make a layer below the red, and then when I put in my black color, I can just go overspray right onto the red, and because it's the layers underneath the red and I had a lot of precision in those areas, it's not going to affect the red area at all. So I can be really quick and rough in those areas. Now the only trick now is I wasn't as clean with my laces, so I'll have to put those on a separate layer, which is fine because I usually like to have my laces on a different layer so that I can add shadows and highlights to them. And I'll show you a technique with the lock transparency tool or function that gives me the ability to add shadows and highlights on a specific layer without affecting other layers. So we have that back panel. We're going to add some black for the logo. And same deal. So we can really be, it depends on how you want to, at what point you want to be precise. Do you want to be precise when you're sketching it, or do you want to erase, have the precision as you're erasing? Both are fine. So here I'm just going to be try to be as accurate as I can, and I'll hit the borders, and then later on, this area here again, I can go underneath the red. But right here I want to make sure I'm really close. There we go. So now I can scale up my brush and just kind of fill in right in there. So there we go. So now let's do a layer over top of the red, and we're going to put in our laces. So once again, I'm going to get in nice and close, and this is going to go right over top of the red. So it takes a little bit of time, depending on how loose of a sketch you want to have. All depends on how rough your technique is and what you want to get out of it. So you can see here I did a little bit of overspray in the red area. No worries, we're going to just cover right over that. So again, keep checking your reference image if you're using one, just to make sure you're kind of coloring the shoe the right way. Since this is a classic, we want to try to stay true to what those classic colors were in this particular case. More, and then we'll begin adding some shading. So there we go. We do have like a woven label up here, and that's red as well. So why don't we go ahead and just do that on our red layer. And the way I'm selecting these colors up in here, I'm holding down Option or Alt. I use a Mac, so I hold down the Option key on my keyboard, and that opens up the eyedropper tool, and then when I select that color, I can kind of go in and out of that eyedropper function real quick. Alright, I also hold Command and then 0. That usually snaps to the entire screen or my image. So you can see right in here, I'm going to go ahead and fill this in because I missed that lace. Let's go back to this here. I can also select here because I have solid colors. I'm going to go ahead and fill that one in. Alright, so there's our basic form. Let's go ahead and I'm going to add in these little perforations in the vamp area as well. So go ahead and since they're kind of small, I'm just going to use the pencil tool. I'm going to fill these in, because the marker tool, based on my settings of my image, my canvas size, the scale of that marker tool or the brush tool gets a little it's actually too big, so I want to have a little bit more control, so I'll use the smaller pencil size diameter. Okay, get those in place. Alright, so we got that in. So since we're here, I'll start adding a little bit of shading to the shoe, and there's a number of ways to go about it. It all depends on what kind of effect you want. You can create shading over top of all your colors as a layer. There's other ways where if you select the red color, and you can do the selection in any layer, you don't have to be on that layer. So I'm holding down the Option key, I'm selecting red even though I'm on the lace layer. And what I want to do is, with my color window open here, increase the a little bit of a darker value of red, and I'll use my airbrush tool. And if you double click on the airbrush tool or any tool, it'll bring up this brush properties window, so you can scale up the size of the brush, the flow, so how much of spray is actually going to go down, and you can also change the brush size down here with the brush properties little icon slider here. So since I want to add some value change to this red, I want to lock it because I don't want the spray to go on the white areas, of course. So if you hold down this little icon in the layers window, and then slide up to lock transparency and release, this will lock that layer, so all the red becomes the only area that you can affect. And if I'm just going to kind of spray in this path here, and you'll notice that it won't affect anywhere else. So I'm getting a little bit darker. In certain areas, and it's not doing anything to the rest of my drawing, which is exactly what I want to happen. And what I'm doing right now is, this is the path of the double row stitching, so I just want to create a little bit of a shadow in that area, because when the stitching goes through your material, it's actually creating almost like a little crevice, and there's a shadow that gets cast in there. So just want to pick up on that. That's going to give us a lot of dimension and depth and that realism that we're looking for. So you notice here I missed this red area of the outsole, but we don't have to worry about that too much at this point. We can go back and erase that in a little while. And I also have like the tread here in the rubber. We're gonna want to get rid of the lower portion of it, because this is like little flex areas, so there's red that actually is going to go away. And then right where this midsole comes in contact with the upper is actually kind of curving into the midsole, so you'll see a little bit of a shadow where that material kind of tucks behind. And then of course any areas where you have like overlapping, so this saddle piece here in the forefoot area is an overlay to the eye stay, which is this piece here, so that's going to get a little bit of a shadow in there, and also down in this area too we're going to get a little bit of a shadow, because this piece is actually higher, it's on top. So kind of go and give a little bit of a shadow. Same, this piece here in the heel, kind of like this strap type piece, that's actually on top of the eye stay as well. So we're going to give that a little bit of a shadow under there. And then where your laces are, you'll get a little bit of a shadow on the red as well. If you've taken color theory and shading and lighting, you'll know you want to make sure you know where your light source is coming in, so that you can create the right cast shadows. So I'm just going to give me a little bit more darker, so I want to really get this to kind of pop off a little bit more. Really kind of separate it from the rest of the shoe. And on this tablet, the harder I press, the sensors actually will pick up on the amount of pressure that I'm applying, and therefore create, it'll put down more of the brush that I'm using. So it has a sensitivity built in, which is almost similar to sketching, with a pencil, or in the airbrush case, it's almost like you're getting closer to your image, to your art piece, and therefore more spray is being applied, which creates a darker effect. So we'll go in later with the stitching, but so right now we got the red kind of in place, and I'm going to go to the black areas and we'll do the same thing. We'll lock the transparency on the black. I activated this black color, but I just need to dial that up a little bit. And if I were to use actual true black here, I wouldn't be able to get any shadows to happen. So I actually, this color here in reality is off black. It's not 100% true black. That way, we can go in and get a little bit of a shadow effect to happen here. And then where my collar kind of tucks under, you get a little bit of a shadow effect there, because the material is kind of rolling over. So right along that seam, there should be a little bit more of a shadow effect that happens. And on the same side, we can go and, depending on how much of a highlight you want to add in here, we can go and add some, a lighter gray tone to catch a little bit of a brighter spot in certain areas. So like for example up here in that collar again, some of the light source coming in is going to pick up a little bit of a highlight up along that curve. So we can kind of go ahead and brighten that up a bit. And I'm not using like a true white. Don't want it to be like a car surface that's really reflective. This is more of a softer, textile and leather kind of product, so I choose not to really go full on white. So there we go. We'll do the same for the laces. So we'll lock that layer, and let's add some shading here. And if you have any texture or anything like that, you can start to add, I'm kind of adding like these little ribs through the laces, just to give it some more texture. And then once again, go in and pick a gray color, and then I can go in and don't forget, you can change the flow. So that's how much actual color is going to be put down. So if you go 100%, you know, once you start pressing, it's gonna add, you know, full on that color. But if you want to kind of build up your color or your values, you know, change the flow to kind of come in at a softer, you know, less intense level, and that way you can kind of build it up slowly. So there we go, we got our laces in. And then you know, let's add some color to the white area. So because I don't have any white, and I'm just going to leave this with a white background right now, we can go in and create another layer, and with my, I'm going to select white, and I'm just going to add a little bit of gray to it, and we'll go in and add a little bit of shading. And this is going to happen underneath everything, so it's not going to go on my black, it's not going to go on the red, and because I'm using like a light gray color, if I didn't do this, it would just, you know, get really sloppy and look really weird on the red and the black. So it's you know, preferred to kind of do this underneath. And there is a groove in here for stitching. It's called an Aryan stitch, and that kind of secures this vulcanized bottom to the upper. So right now there's no stitching yet. I'm going to add that later, but I'm going to put in that like little shadow area, because that goes in pretty far, so you should be getting a good shadow happening there. And again, you know, the more experience you have, you remember where your light source is coming in. So right now, even though I changed the angle of the canvas, I know that my light source is, you know, coming in from like the bottom right side, kind of casting upwards. So I'm able to keep with the correct lighting and applying shadows in the right position. Otherwise, you don't want to be doing it all the time from the top left, because it'll just start to look really weird. You'll have shadows being cast in all these different directions. So again, here's a stitching that's happening on the white. So I'm just going to go in and kind of darken those areas. And then right along the base, where the rubber meets the midsole, just going to kind of hit a little bit of a shadow in there. So pretty clean. Let's go and fix the red. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the lock transparency, because you cannot erase when the lock transparency is active. So you'll get a warning saying, like, you know, cannot perform that operation. So you have to remember to turn off the lock transparency. It's not a big deal. And then just going to go in and, as I mentioned before, just get rid of all this, because these are actually like flex areas in the rubber outsole. I'm holding space to activate this dialog right here. So if you hold down the space bar, that dialog shape will open up wherever your cursor is, and that allows you to move the canvas, rotate it, scale in and out. So super functional tool. I'm just going to go ahead and add a little bit more shading and darken this a little bit more on that tongue area. So kind of this area here where the red material kind of overlays and the tongue kind of tucks in. Just kind of add a little bit darker shading in there, and this little woven label at the top too, Just going to give that kind of darken because that's a kind of pops off the tongue. So we'll darken that. And then I forgot over here, you know, our logo and this eye stay piece, you know, we have a shadow here. This is of course on top. And you can see I started the shadow here. Let me get in closer. I started the shadow on the black area, and then I forgot to put that in here. So go ahead and do that. And since this is an overlay piece, I'll carry this shadow that's happening on the red. We'll kind of pull that back down. Maybe a little bit of a shadow on here. And then my logo, I want to kind of put in, you know, again, the light's coming in from the top left over here and coming down towards the bottom right. So since this piece is stitched on, I'm just going to cast a shadow like that. Alright, now the red's looking a little dull because I have my shadows, but I don't have any highlights here or any like brighter areas. So I'm gonna pick my red, and I have the red dots up here because those are true. So once you start adding color or shading, you start transforming that red into a darker tone. So by having red, I can kind of go in and play with the color wheel here to get a little bit more of a pink, or you can go right into a you know, go use white, but we're going to kind of use a little bit of an off-white, kind of like more of a red pinkish value, and just kind of add some highlight areas, you know, just a little bit. We don't want to go too crazy, but areas that are going to get a little bit more kind of light on those surfaces that kind of pop up or stick up a little bit more than other areas. And I do have lock transparency on, so that's good because that'll kind of maintain the area that this gets applied. I'm just going to go in a little bit darker with my red. Alright, so I think we're good. Now all that's left to do is add some stitching, and I'll show you how to do this area stitch. But one last thing, there is a logo over here, the Air Jordan logo, and what I did was I do have that already created as a PNG with the multiplied knocked out background. So I just import that into this drawing, and I pressed M, which gives me this selection tool here. So I'll select that, and because this is on its own layer, I can take that and scale it and rotate it and scale it and move it and get it to kind of get right into the right spot. There we go, kind of like that, and then I'll hit X to lock that in. And there, we just placed our logo. And if you want to get some definition here, because this logo is kind of debossed and then printed, we want to add some like highlights. So I'm just going to go and make a new layer on top of the logo, and you can use your airbrush tool, but see, I can't scale any further down, so I'll get, this is actually going to give me kind of a bigger shape. So we may want to go in later on with the pencil tool, but what I'm trying to do is just pick up some like little highlights that kind of show that this piece has been like molded and pressed down. And then you can go in, and if I select the red area, like darker red, put in kind of like shading, make this look like it's pushed down as a molded piece. So you can spend a little bit of time on this. Switch our pencil tool, put white on there, pop a little bit of brighter spots. Here we go, that kind of looks like it's been pressed into this leather piece here. So yeah, so next we'll go ahead and add some stitching.